Yep.
That is such a new feature. I have no clue. But
And then it tells me the meeting's being recorded and I have to okay it.
oh, it does?
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Mm.
Well, hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you for consenting to being recorded.
It's my pleasure.
It's so good to see you again.
You too.
You ready to talk about failures?
Oh, I've been thinking about this nonstop since I read it. So, yes.
I have been thinking of failure in terms of my own life recently. So I was just like, is this going to hit a little too close to home? Am I going to need more therapy after this?
I definitely felt attacked in while reading this chapter.
Oh my gosh. Yes. 1,000,000%. It is like it's not how I thought the chapter was going to go. Just like this entire book.
Yeah. But this one, at least I think in the past, I had an idea. It's like within the context of race. But this, I had no idea. And I definitely would have never guessed the way he went about it.
I know, right? So, like, what were you thinking about whenever you saw the title was failure?
Failure. I really went blank. I had no clue. I was maybe considering that he was going to talk about failure in terms of like the very stereotypical conversation we have of like the system failing us and oh, it's not really failing us because it was never meant for us, but that's not what he did. What were you thinking?
Um, so I was just thinking, okay, a lot of things have failed in the history of mankind.
Mhm.
So, what are we going to specify about failure? Like, because I feel like failure is just like the story of man almost. Notice how
Mm,
I said men the entire time.
you did.
Um, but the definition underneath failure was activist, one who has a record of power over one who has a record of power or policy change. Would you define activist like that? How would you define activist?
Yeah, before reading that, I would not have. I would have thought more active as someone pushing for change.
Yeah.
But his is more action. His definition is more action based. So you have to have the power to then change the policy and then change the policy.
Yeah. So like whenever I was wanting to be like a hipster or whatever in high school and people were like, "What do you want to do for your career?" And I said I wanted to be a humanitarian activist.
Mm-hmm.
I cringe at 17-year-old Hannah all the time. Like I was just like, "Oh, honey, activist is not a career. Activist is a state of being, you idiot child."
All I say is we are thankful for growth. We are thankful that we now know better.
I think what I was wanting as a 17-year-old was to never have a job.
Which I mean, I'm currently in that state, I feel. I'm not trying to work a 9 to 5.
Just, like, would you consider yourself an activist right now?
By Kendi's definition, no.
Yeah.
No.
By Kendi's definition, I'd be what his definition of a failure is.
As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, not an activist. Even I don't think I would have considered myself an activist before, but maybe like on the way to becoming an activist. But by Kendi's definition, mm-mm.
Exactly. What were you thinking about like his entire story about the what was it? The what what was the town's name? I remember the number 6.
The town.
The town they were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The 6 kids who were up for
Jena.
yeah,
The Jena
Jena
6.
6. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So the Jena 6, I've never heard of them.
Me neither.
So like what were you thinking whenever Kendi brought it up? I was thinking like in terms of like um what is it? Like the Central Park 5, something like that.
Yeah.
Um but also in the context that Kendi was describing, he was talking about this as in like it was like some huge national news. We were alive during this.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't
I never heard of it. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, granted, we were 7,
Mhm.
but like I feel like just any sort of like big newsworthy national thing, which it's crazy that this event didn't really reach us, I guess,
Mhm.
because it seems to be such a poignant like example of the racist system that we are living in the racist not social justice, racist criminal justice system that we're operating under.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Do
yet,
you want to give a synopsis of the Jena 6 story?
yeah, so what happened was um of course it's all teenagers because teenagers their brains aren't fully developed, so I'm not saying that excuses actions, but teenagers are all idiots. I think I've already explained that I was an idiot as a 17-year-old. So the Jena 6, what happened was there was a racist incident at this high school where there were nooses placed in a tree um around where a bunch of the black students, right, hung out. And so in retaliation, some students beat up another student
Mhm. A
and
white student.
a white student.
Mhm.
Yeah. And like the majority of the Jena 6 were being tried as adults with a maximum punishment of 100 years in prison.
Mhm.
And that's kids that are barely 18,
Mhm.
which obviously that is not fair. That's ridiculous. And so what Kendi was trying to do was trying to organize the community to try to put pressure on the government, to put pressure on the judicial system um, to let them go. So, uh-oh. I've been getting a lot of spam calls recently, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
So Kendi was planning this giant, like, let's go storm Capitol Hill situation, disrupt everything, which basically alienated Kendi from his fellow students and his fellow activists because the risk was just it just seemed like the risk was not going to outweigh the benefits, right? Of what might
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, because they were the opposition was that it's illegal.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we're gonna get in trouble and we're gonna have to deal with racist cops for a plan that we already know is not legal.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is Kendi's plan versus what we saw with the January 6 riots.
Mhm.
Just seeing what white people essentially can get away with.
Yeah. Yeah. A big part of that, like going off on that, is the fact that they got that close to the Capitol. Like there was no talk, but the fact that they weren't seen as
Domestic terrorists.
yeah, they weren't seen as dangerous as like Black Lives Matter protesters
Mhm.
and Black and brown people. I mean, there's racist like overtones like explicitly out there. And that's what a lot of people were shocked at. Like, how could you even let them get that close to the Capitol building?
Yeah, let alone inside.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw that there was I'm going to send the link to the tweet to you, but there was a crazy like crazy party in California over the weekend where over like 1,000 people attended, like 150 people got arrested. They dispatched like 150 police to go and disband this party. And someone commented that they dispatched more police to go try to control that party than they did to control the Capitol riots.
Yep. Yeah. Why the National Guard wasn't called. Yep.
And it baffles me whenever I think about protests and like historically, like whenever I think about the civil rights movement happening in my dad's lifetime, my parents' lifetime, like the kind of struggles and the brutality that Black and brown people had to go through for that when they were peacefully protesting as well. It's to know that the Capitol riots even were possible. It makes me really, really angry knowing that people that came before had literally bled and died over peaceful protest and trying to just get the right to vote, to live, to make their way in life.
Mm-hmm.
But very entitled human beings got upset over losing an election fairly.
Mm-hmm.
And there was absolutely like there was no retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously pointing to the fact that there's something wrong with the system. A
Yeah.
system that allows people to go and to break into the Capitol building is the same system that will kill people
Yeah.
over supposedly counterfeit dollar bills.
Yeah. I think you bring up a great point. Like, what are the two groups fighting for? Human rights and privilege. And that's astonishing. And it definitely is systematic, and it goes back to the founding of this country.
Mm-hmm. I like how Kendi goes further into um the history, goes once again into the history about how different abolitionists just failed in, what was it? They failed in like their ideologies and how they were able to I'm sorry, I'm like at a loss right now, but
It's
like
all good.
how the prominent ideologies that were able to secure things like abolition and voting rights were still failures in the sense that they were still racist ideologies.
Mm,
Like, I think he used a quote from Abraham Lincoln saying that, like, he didn't care whether or not he freed anyone, he just wanted to save the Union.
yeah.
Like, and I think it's interesting to put that, like, Lincoln wasn't the most anti-racist person ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though he's known for freeing the slaves, but
Yeah.
he didn't single-handedly do that.
Yeah. And he didn't even do it for the reasons you think he did it for, which history that's taught in schools. It's not good. It's not honest. And then, I mean, I remember reading Before the Mayflower, which is a great book. I definitely recommend it. And they're talking about the same thing, how Lincoln wasn't actually anti-racist. He wasn't even not racist. He was saving the Union. But I think this is a great segue into Kendi, and he did a really great job of explaining that it's always selfish intent. It is always what's best for the people in power. And so sometimes if that's something that seems anti-racist, then I'll do it. But it's not because it's the right thing to do.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
That is a rough slap of reality for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, call me an idealist, but I would like to think that people will do the right thing because it is right, not because of what benefits them and whether or not they're able to gain power through a specific action.
Yeah.
That just, I like to believe that people are inherently good at their core, but that just kind of makes me like sad for humanity.
Yeah. It's really scary because okay, so now we know people don't do things because it's the right thing to do. They do it because of self-interest. But these are people who are in charge of very important life-changing things. And I mean, I'm guided by my moral compass, so that I don't even know how to begin to get into that mindset.
We're guided by our moral compasses because we have no power.
Mm. I would like to believe that if I had power, then I would still be guided by my moral compass.
I'm sure we all start off like that. I know that I would be a terrible and terrifying overlord because I would go the opposite direction. I would be a vengeful god. Anyways, I would be benevolent but vengeful, but vengeful.
But vengeful.
See, there was a theme that was in my high school AP English class where we talked about absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm.
So even whenever we look at people of color that are in power, that have platforms, that have influence, like people have criticisms about Kamala Harris,
Mm-hmm.
like how as the DA she was really against police reform.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that kind of,
Yeah. When you're in power, what will you do?
yeah,
Yeah.
like what will you do for your own, out of your own self-interest? I mean, she's vice president now, so
Mhm. So what will she do? And I mean, like, that's a real question because we were definitely promised things like student loan relief and off the top of my head, some Green New Deal situations. So, you know, our
mm,
planet can survive. And there hasn't been much.
yeah, like the Biden Harris administration also had the lowest refugee admittance, even including the Trump era, and then finally there was enough outrage that they raised the ceiling and the cap of refugees admitted into the country to be resettled. But that was after people started calling them out for it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like politics feels like it's going like when Trump was in office, everything was wide open. Like he was shady and we knew it and there was no question about it. But now it's becoming secretive again, where it's still like very bad policies, not great for any marginalized, underserved population. We just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as publicized anymore.
Yeah, it's because Biden isn't tweeting it.
Yeah.
He started tweeting all of his bad policies. I'm sure we'd get a lot more.
I must say, I do not miss my president tweeting policy changes or every feeling he was feeling.
Exactly. I didn't like it when the president was weighing in on celebrity feuds and that was the man with the nuclear launch codes.
Yes. Yeah. So we are in a better place, but it's I wouldn't say it's a great place.
It's not the best place.
It is
Are
not.
we in are we possibly in a place where we might go to war with Iran again, with Iran again? Who knows?
Yeah.
Probably, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. It's more secretive now.
Yeah,
Back to how it was.
exactly, especially with the Israeli Palestinian conflict happening right now too. And did you see like the Biden administration had approved for like rocket sales to Israel?
No, I did not see that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's been legislation to block it, the sale of it, but it's like, even if we are in a better place, it's not an ideal place.
Because I
So
mean, better for this country is in no way good.
exactly. And so like I think what Kendi was trying to say was, even if we're having the better situation out of some really rough things happening, like it's still a failure ultimately,
Mm,
because it's not equitable, it's not 100% just.
yeah. Yeah, and I think he was also just talking about how we're trying to achieve equity and justice because the way we've been approaching it is what he he said is the failure. We haven't been looking at it. I mean, I think it's been approached as okay, if we let people know that different communities are uniquely harmed by the status quo, then they'll want what's best for everyone. We know that's not the case anymore, but we're still approaching it as a moral dilemma where if people know, if they see the studies, if they read the articles, if they listen to the podcast, then things will change. That's, I mean, that's not how it is. That's how it's been approached, though.
I know, right? And like even what we're doing right now, we're talking about it, we're reading the books, we're doing the work, but ah
This is why I felt personally attacked. I was like, is he talking about us?
So, in Kendi's words, we're still a failure right now, and we have
Yeah.
to come to terms with that.
Yeah, there was a specific part where he was like, yeah, you can talk about it or you can read about it, but if you're not using your power to change policies, it's not activism. I was like,
I was like, I am but a small person.
I will say after reading these chapters and having discussions, I do look at things differently and I do approach things differently. So if I like, because I mean, I even have problematic tendencies when it comes to underserved populations. And so when I say, oh, hey, like I would have approached that like this, like naturally, but that's really problematic. And I can see myself correcting my behavior. So something is happening. Definitely not activism, but something.
Like, for it to truly be activism, there needs to be power and there needs to be influence.
Mhm.
I don't I don't know. Like I hope that I would be able to influence policy in a way, but in terms of like my experience with actually working to change policy, I had one meeting one time with one representative in the state of Texas legislature, and people, Representative Doc Anderson didn't know what DACA was. He is a state representative of a border state and did not know what DACA was,
Wow.
is.
He's
Yeah, I'm
currently a
he,
representative.
he is a sitting Texas state representative. Also, the Texas state legislature just passed a bill allowing people to open carry handguns without a license.
I heard about that. Okay. Open carry was already crazy, but without a license, who does that benefit?
I don't know. I do not know. And also, another problematic thing is the Texas state legislature only meets every 2 years.
Really?
Yeah, it's written into our freaking constitution because we were a country before we were a state. So that was written into the constitution.
Every 2 years.
I know. It's dumb as bleep.
Wow.
Texas history, y'all. Breaking the fourth wall, kind of like Jim on The Office.
Wow, we're learning some valuable lessons about Texas right now.
I know. I'm probably going to get hate mail. I think it's pretty clear my disdain for the state of Texas.
I think so.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, though. I mean, if you could walk around with a gun without a license, which also is not that hard to get, so why are we waiving that? And then if you are not meeting but every 2 years.
Yep. And so what was interesting was I saw in the news that this is the first time that the Texas state legislature has met since the El Paso shooting.
Really?
Yeah. You know, the El Paso shooting where the guy literally killed 23 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a racist attack.
Mm-hmm.
And he specifically was targeting a certain race.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Wow.
And they still passed it.
And so, and this is a perfect example. It's not that they don't see that people are being affected, all people are getting affected, but specifically when it comes to mass shootings, specific populations are being affected. It's not that they don't see that, they don't care. It's about their self-interest.
Exactly. And policymakers accepting donations from like guns rights or Second Amendments, whatever buffoons. It's so bizarre. And like even like my family members are people that own guns. And so like it's interesting to hear what they think about gun legislature when like I tell them the statistics, I tell them what's happening, and they're like, "Oh, that can't be true," or they gaslight me, and it goes back to influence and self-interest. If it's in my family member's best interest to keep their gun, they're gonna keep their gun, and I'm not influencing anything.
Yeah.
So even on a micro level, I'm failing as an activist.
It's hard because you can't change people's minds. And so like Kendi was talking about the bus riots in Atlanta, yeah, and or the bus protest in Atlanta. So people like it got into their pockets. Like people were not getting on the bus, so they were not getting money. And so they were like, okay, we have to do something. But like that's not even a change of opinion. They probably still weren't a huge fan, but they had to do what they wanted to do because the money drove their decision making.
Exactly. So like money is such a driver for all of these policies that are being made. So I'm just like, I have no money. So I can't be an influencer or an activist because I have no money.
There's a book that I was reading, You're a Bad A at Making Money.
Yeah.
And I'm forgetting the author's name, but she says like towards the beginning of the book that one of the best things you could do for like philanthropy or trying to make the world better is be rich. So in that way you can allocate your money towards the causes that you're most passionate about.
Yeah, and like one of my career aspirations is to get into grant writing, but grant money comes with very specific guidelines on how that money is used and how organizations have to report back on how the grants are being used and how the money is being used, or else they don't get the money. So these organizations create so much policy based off of money.
Yeah.
We're all failures. It's fine.
So how do we move forward? I mean, what I got from this was Kendi, well, this isn't even like pertaining to this. What I got from the chapter is Kendi said, we have to take responsibility. We have not been approaching this correctly. Yeah, a policy might not be passed because people are racist, but it's also because we know they're racist and we still didn't phrase it in the way that we needed to be phrased to be passed. So where do we go from this?
Well, where I'm going to go, first of all, is I am going to go bang my head on a wall for a good 10 minutes. And then I'm going to try to figure out how I can influence, like, how is it possible to influence policy without money?
Okay.
Try to figure out like ways to do that. Like things can go viral on Instagram and Twitter, I guess, and that can influence policy if there's enough people outraged about it. But that goes back to Kendi doing the whole individual, like alienating the individuals by like being too radical and being a failure that way. So it's a vicious cycle of failure.
I will say failure is a very important part of the process. Like you're not going to succeed all the time, but if you learn from the failure, it can be quite valuable.
It can be, but I also am very competitive and I hate losing and I hate being a failure.
You are very competitive. I can attest to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was talking to my therapist this morning about being competitive in yoga, and she was like, Hannah, it's yoga. Seriously? And I was like,
You can't help it.
it's true. My goodness. So I am once again like starting to really fade. But we hopefully, or not hopefully, thankfully, we get to talk about success next week.
Yes, the pure opposite of failure.
Yes. So I won't feel like a failure whenever we're talking about it, hopefully. Hopefully, it'll like what I'm hoping for the next chapter is it will be the pat on the back, because I've felt very bad about myself throughout this book. It will be the pat on the back that's like, you're doing okay, champ. You got this. Like, you can do it, instead of the just leaning on the sink. I'm quoting Taylor Tomlinson, the comedian, by the way. Instead of just like leaning on the sink, just going, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think this week was like him opening up something to create questions, and next week should be him closing it again.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a nice full circle thing.
I hope so. I truly, truly hope so. Well, thank you again. It's always great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. I look forward to next week.
I will see you next week when we get to talk about our successes. Yay!
Bye.
Bye.
Wait.